Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Pune International Center, I extend a very warm welcome to all our guests, speakers, and members of the audience joining us today for the book discussion in collaboration with Prayas Energy Group. The discussion is on a very timely and important book, Rising Ambition, Carving New Pathways, India's Energy Transition. India today stands at a fascinating intersection where development aspirations, climate commitments, and technological transformation must move forward together. Navigating this transition requires both policy clarity and institutional imagination, and this book offers a thoughtful perspective on exactly that. Authored by Mr. Ajay Shankar, the book reflects on India's energy journey so far and examines how the country can pursue its net zero commitment by 2070 while sustaining economic growth and minimizing transition costs. What makes the book especially valuable is that it draws from decades of policy experience while presenting complex energy challenges in a way that is accessible to both experts and wider audiences. Requesting all to please check the copies of the book post-event. They are available outside. We are fortunate today to have with us a distinguished panel to reflect on the ideas presented in the book. Our keynote speaker and the author of the book, Mr. Ajay Shankar, is a former IAS officer who had an illustrious career spanning 45 years in public service, during which he served as secretary in several key ministries, including industries, power, and urban development. He is currently a distinguished fellow at TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute. Notably, during his tenure in the Ministry of Power, he played a key role in several transformative initiatives, including the Electricity Act 2003, expansion of rural electrification, and the conceptualization of the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. We are truly privileged to have him with us today. Joining the discussion is Mr. Shantanu Dixit, one of the founding members of Prayas Energy Group. For over 3 decades, he has worked extensively on issues related to power sector regulation, electricity tariffs and subsidies, renewable energy policy, and consumer interests in electricity markets. Mr. Dixit has served on several important government and regulatory committees at both state and national levels, and his work has significantly shaped public interest discourse in the power sector. We are also joined by Mr. Mahesh Deodhar, who heads the Center for Sustainable Energy and Mobility at PIC. He brings rich experience across industry and technology for more than 20 years. At PIC, he is leading efforts to strengthen research and dialogue on energy transition, mobility, and sustainability. To begin the evening, I now invite Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President of PIC, to deliver the welcome address and share his thoughts.
Sri Ajay Shankar, our distinguished speaker this evening, my colleague and one of the panelists, Mahesh Deodhar, and Mr. Dixit, and friends. It's very, very fortunate that we have Sri Shankar to speak on the topic of what he calls the rising ambition. And I mean, if anybody wanted the salience of the issue, what's happening today in the world brings out a new dimension of the security problem, what's happening in Middle East. But I want to also remember, take this opportunity to remember Girish Sant, who created this institution, because I think it was one of the first independent think tanks in this area in India. And our ambition is to become like Girish Sant's Prayas, different fields in the PIC. So I'm delighted that Prayas holding this event here, because that gives the opportunity to pay tribute to Girish Sant. I'll give my 2 cents worth of what I think as of now. The way I think of energy in policy in India is really declining share of carbon molecule is what has been happening over the centuries, starting with coal, then went to oil, and now natural gas. And now eventually complete disappearance of carbon molecules. So essentially, fight against the carbon molecule has been the energy scene in India. And but I think this book by Sri Shankar is far more ambitious and far more detailed, so I wouldn't want to go to his area. But I just want to only mention that what's happening today in the world, the energy security, as of now, has become very important. I mean, there's not just long term. And I think we have to be mindful of problems of today. And these are going to be very difficult times. I foresee very difficult times in the coming months for India particularly. And but this book hopefully gave us a number of ways out. So once again, I want to welcome Ajay for agreeing to come to here. And of course, to you holding this important meeting here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kirkar, for setting the context so beautifully. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Ajay Shankar to share his insights from his book, Rising Ambition Carving New Pathways India's Energy Transition.
Respected Kelkarji, friends in the audience, so I won't take names, otherwise I'll take a long time. But I must thank Prayas and the PIC for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts, which are indicated in the book. No, I'm fine. Now, this is my first book, and I'm not young. So many friends have asked me, what got into your head to write a book? I have been writing on energy issues for some time, and that's how Prayas and we are good friends. So the initial suggestion was that I'd put together my opinion pieces in a book. And then I thought, may as well challenge myself and write a proper book with a proper narrative. Now, the title of the book is Rising Ambition, Carving New Pathways. I had initially thought just of the title Energy Transition. Now, the reason I chose these two phrases is reflected in the first two chapters of the book. And I was in government and I had inside experience of what happened. So the first chapter describes of how India achieved what the International Energy Agency describes as the historically unprecedented extension of electrification in the world, taking electricity to 700 million households in about 12 years. Now, in the year 2000, I was a joint secretary and I had approved an unstarred question reply, which said that at the current rate, Bihar would take over 700 years to complete village electrification. So that's where we began. So the whole chapter 1 shows that as a country, if we make up our minds, we can do enormous things. The second chapter is about the success of the solar mission. I again was fortunate to be in government and was associated with the design of the mission. And when the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, announced that we'll have a mission and we'll do 20,000 megawatts by 2022, everybody who was there in that meeting of committee of secretaries says, I mean, how has he done it? Why has he done it? It can't happen. Where is the money? The problem with money very, very simple. That the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission had approved a tariff of over 17 rupees per unit of solar power. And thermal power was available 4.5 rupees a unit. So clearly you needed a subsidy of 12 or 13 rupees a unit. And where was that money to come from? So it was a non-starter. Now, today we are very proud of what we have achieved in solar power. Last year, capacity grew at over 35%. We are about 50,000 megawatts of solar. And fossil fuel electricity capacity is now over half of the total capacity in the country. So the solar mission has been an extraordinary success. Now, the policy lesson of that success is something that is not adequately appreciated or recognized, and I have spelled it out in the book. Now, typically, when government wants to support a program, what does it do? It'll create a department or a public sector company to do something, or it will say that we'll give something a subsidy because it's very expensive. To make it affordable in the market, we'll give a subsidy. Most MNRE programs have been designed around subsidies. Now, this program took the novel approach of inviting bids for long-term supply of solar power. And in the first year when bids were invited, the quantities were very small. The idea was that let's discover the market and let people find out what it's all about. And I remember a lot of discussion then that this program is going to be stillborn because bids will be invited, nobody will bid, people will bid, not put up solar panels, and why are we not getting into technical specifications, how efficient the solar panels should be, etc. etc. But the argument which prevailed was that we'll invite bids for long-term supply. So this was an extension of the idea of long-term tariff-based bids for thermal power plants. There again, it had been done for the first time in 2007. Before that, the view was thermal power plants are too complicated, so somebody should look at the technology and the costs and then approve a tariff. Now, our initial beginning in 92 with the IPPs was a disaster. And I think Prayas had a very major role to play in drawing attention to the disaster that was unfolding. Great public service. And I was in the power sector for years, and when I was not in the ministry, I was told by every technocrat and bureaucrat that tariff bidding cannot be undertaken. It just can't succeed. And when the ultra mega power project tariff-based bids happened, and I had something to do with it, I had bets with many people saying it will be a failure, government will be embarrassed, you will not get bids, you will get conditional bids, you will not know what to do with it. We got unconditional bids, and the tariff was 30% less than I expected. So that gave me the confidence, let's try it for the solar mission. So first year the tariffs were 12 rupees, and now they are around 2.5 rupees, and everybody says that they are a great success. And firms which were born because of the solar mission are giants. So Renew Power was born to compete for the small contracts which came out of the solar mission. Now, part of the reason prices have crashed is because of China, and they've done a great job in reducing the cost of production. But with those same prices for solar panels, our solar power is the cheapest in the world because we have developers who are very efficient and do a very good job of installation. Now, the policy lesson, which what I was coming to is that a long-term power purchase contract does the two things. One is that the sale of the power produced is assured for the life of the project. The second is the price is assured. So any investment in any field, the investor is looking at what? Risk of offtake or sale, risk of price. Now, when both risks are mitigated fully, then you get extraordinary results. Now, this is a policy lesson which is yet to sink into our consciousness. That no matter how difficult or new the technology is, if government finds a way of de-risking through offtake and price, and it's done competitively, you will get the best outcome because market forces are very powerful and India is integrated into global markets. Now, this I believe is an innovation in India also because I'm not aware of any of the advanced countries having used this device or this policy instrument to push the energy transition. So they've all been obsessed with the market mechanism, a carbon price, a carbon tax, and so on and so forth. And the results have been quite disappointing, actually. So I think we are pioneers in the world and doing something which has worked very well. Now, having described what we've done, that's why I said we've done extraordinarily well. So rising confidence and therefore rising ambition. Carving new pathways is a phrase I want to keep emphasizing because we very often as a people, as elite ministries, don't have enough confidence that we can find solutions for our problems. So the knee-jerk reaction is World Bank is wiser, let's go to them. ADB is wiser, let's go to them. And now you have all these foreign consultancy firms who are wiser, and therefore we go to them for all kinds of policy. I wish we would feel more confident in ourselves. We'll take better decisions, because the two success stories described in the book in the first two chapters had no influence of the World Bank or any consultant or any agency. So it's possible for us to do right things. And I mean, I've had discussions with Prayas from the days Girish was there, and I was a much younger joint secretary, and we have in government done very good things on our own. So I want the next generation to believe that they can do their own thinking. Now, after this, the book is prescriptive, and the book is born out of the thought that in Glasgow, Prime Minister Modi surprised the world and all of us in India, saying we'll become net zero by 2070. Because till then our position was, West has created the problem, they should all solve it, we will do what we can. So very unambiguous commitment of net zero by 2070 was announced for the first time. Now I thought, let me think about it. Because 2070 is far away, and most people in the policy establishment felt 2070 तो बहुत दूर है, क्या होगा देखा जाए, let's concentrate in the near. And a lot of good analysis and discussion takes place on the near term. Now the near term big announcement in Glasgow was 500 GW of fossil fuel free capacity by 2030. That seemed unachievable, but with the success that we are having with solar panels and projects growing at 35% per annum, 500 GW is doable. So I thought, let me challenge myself mentally and think beyond the 500 GW. So I thought about net zero. So the book is a policy book. It's not about numbers. It's not about we need X trillion dollars, and unless the West gives it to us, we can't do anything. It doesn't go there. Nor does it do what is normal is to do scenario building, optimistic, median, and pessimistic. So we've not gone there. It's all about policy. Now, if we look at the global view on how to get to net zero, it's pretty straightforward. You've got to stop using fossil fuels. Because fossil fuels give you carbon dioxide, so you stop using it. It's as simple as that. So where and how to do it, and that's where the book goes. So globally, the view is that you can electrify as many sectors of economic activity as is technically possible. And you increase the share of renewables in the electricity mix. So per unit carbon dioxide emission from electricity comes down, and outside household consumption, industry and other areas start using electricity. So then you have two trajectories. One is greater use of electricity as a substitute for fossil fuels in economic activity, and greater share of renewables in electricity generation, so you get lower per carbon dioxide emission per unit of electricity. So these two trajectories can converge one day so that there is zero emission of carbon dioxide from electricity, and whatever can be electrified is using carbon-free electricity. When that happens, roughly 40-50% of carbon emissions go. Now, when I look at it from the Indian perspective, things have become much better since the time I thought of writing the book. So the problem which is usually highlighted about solar power is that you get electricity only when the sun shines. So what do you do at night? And there is a view, and not without merit, that if I need thermal power for providing electricity at night, then my total costs don't come down because I pay the fixed cost charges. So the solution is storage. So if you can store electricity generated from the sun or by sun's energy for use at night, then you don't need thermal power. And fortunately, in the last 2 years, there has been enormous movement in the right direction. So bids have been invited for battery storage, and the prices have come down dramatically. So in 10 years, battery storage prices have fallen 90%. And this is the global market. So this has happened irrespective of the legitimate concerns about availability of lithium on the planet and rare earths. And the other two ways of storing electricity are traditional ways and don't depend on rare earths. So one is pump storage projects. So you can have pump storage on rivers where hydro projects exist. And you can also do pump storage projects off rivers by creating two reservoirs like the overhead tank and something below, and the water goes pumps up and down. And the good news is the first unit of an off-river pump storage project has already been commissioned in India. And the prices are very attractive. So today the situation is that solar plus storage is cheaper than new thermal. So that's a huge breakthrough. Solar plus storage is cheaper than new thermal. So if we were wanting to give our consumers cheap electricity, we should give them solar plus storage. That carbon emissions come down is an incidental benefit. That's the way to look at it. Because the debate gets framed about, the rest of the world is saying stop using coal or whatever. So my book argues that yes, we have a right to burn coal, but why burn it and give our consumers more expensive electricity? Now this argument is yet to seep through. Now the other two arguments are that do we have the land to generate all the solar power we need? Now there is a TERI paper which has come to the conclusion that we can have per capita consumption levels of electricity of Europe and land is not a constraint. And if we succeed with agri-PV, which is the new technology, where you can put solar panels over, say, tea gardens and maybe get a higher outcome of the tea leaves, then both sides gain. And the Germans have done great service in doing pilot projects in their own country. And now they are supporting pilot projects in India to find out where agri-PV can be done and in what manner, etc. So that's a revolution that's happening. And the Central Electricity Authority has done a detailed study of the hydropower potential on our river projects, the hydro projects. And that number is also 1 lakh megawatts, so 100 GW. So there is no constraint either for solar power or for storage. So the only thing is storage has to be ramped up rapidly. Now, the way to think about storage is that you lose 20% of the electricity when you store it. So for every 100 megawatts of solar, you need 120 megawatts of storage. So that's a gigantic scale. But doable, because in the market bids are getting good bids and private sector is very enthusiastic about developing pump storage projects. So it's not a constraint. Now, if we think through this logic, then we can electrify all road transport, because every car company, auto company has an EV version on the road now, from the luxury end of Jaguar and Mercedes to Tata, whatever is Tiago. And now the light commercial vehicles are also on the road, which are electric. So if we want to accelerate that transition, and given the way oil prices are going to 120 or wherever, I think it would make a good sense for us to take a policy decision, and this is for government, that from a prospective year and in a scaled manner, all new commercial vehicles will get permits only if they are electric. So where electric vehicles are in the market, government can easily say that you want a permit. Without a permit, you can't drive a commercial vehicle. As a light commercial vehicle, light duty truck, or a taxi, or an Uber, or whatever, let it be electric. Now, the moment you do that, dependence on oil imports comes crashing down, because the bulk of road transport is for commercial purposes. Personal cars don't drive that much. And you can take that decision today because the electric vehicles running on the road are not more expensive. I mean, I use one, I find it cheap. I mean, my per passenger kilometer cost tells me that I've saved a lot of money in 3-4 years. and all the taxis run so much for them, it's a net saving. So if you take that decision, it's a huge movement of the pendulum without any additional cost. And whatever tax subsidies are there for EVs can continue because the government is absorbing that. Now, railways have on their own done full electrification, but it costs more to run a train by diesel than by electricity. Now, one can be futuristic. One can look at arc furnaces using green electricity to produce green steel. So instead of the blast furnace route using our own iron ore, we could even well import scrap from the rest of the world and make green steel. And that's a low-hanging fruit. So that's the way to think about how to move faster to net zero without imposing additional costs. Now, there'll be one point where costs will arise. And so supposing you decide that, okay, existing thermal power plants have to close down. And one day they would have to, or be reduced dramatically, so that you reduce carbon emission. When you do that, there's a real cost, because the coal mining goes, those employed in coal mining go, NTPC and thermal power companies have to become green energy companies or face a decline. So I argue that they should begin thinking strategically of the day when this will begin, so they're better prepared. And they can all convert themselves into green energy companies. Coal India can become a green energy company. It's sitting on a gold mine of land. Undulating land, they could become the leading producers of pump storage projects off river. They can put solar projects. They are in a belt where India needs more rapid economic growth. So they can create new Jamshedpurs, which will be industrial towns. Because no new industrial town has come up in those areas after Bokaro and Raurkela and Jamshedpur 150 years back. So they have to think strategically. But when we think of reducing what is there, then the way to think about it is that if the existing carbon emitting capacity has to be closed, and there is a cost to it. So the sooner we stop creating new carbon dioxide emitting capacity, the smaller is the quantity which we have to close and bring down to zero. So common sense without sophisticated modeling and net present value calculations would show that sooner emissions peak somewhere, the lower is the cost of bringing it to zero. So it makes great sense for industry, for business, for planners, for bankers to think about it, that there will be that cost of closing a plant. So why not move in a direction where peaking takes place earlier and the cost of closure comes down? Now, globally, there is a huge debate about this cost of closure. Now, in this book, I argue that in India, we are unique and very privileged. And that this cost may appear to be not the kind of stark cost that it appears when you look at it. And I argue that we are a country at a very early stage of urbanization, early stage of industrialization, and land is a gold mine. Our political economy states revolves around land and development. So the land, bank or the huge estates which thermal power plants have, which coal mines have, can be used for modern purposes, and they will generate huge surpluses. So if you look at Bombay, when L&T has closed some of its factories and built commercial things and made lots of money out of it, or the other old textile mills, one sees that process, and the gains are windfall. Now this privilege India has. Germany doesn't have it, or USA doesn't have it. We have it. So we should recognize it that the land that gets released, if you're smart enough and intelligent enough in replanning and developing it, you may actually be a beneficiary of closing these old plants, especially when those which are near cities. Or like Badarpur, Delhi is lying like a abandoned place, but the land there is extraordinary value. I hope someday they're smart enough to get money out of it. Now, once you start thinking of the cost of coming down to zero, then I argue that these lumpy investments in LNG terminals and long-term contracts should be subjected to very close review on the assumption that the demand may go down. So supposing we do decide that all commercial vehicles will be electric, then the demand for imported petrol will crash. So I think the petroleum ministry and all those who are associated with need to think afresh. Because this thing that share of gas will go up from 6 to 15%. Now, one thing which we should recognize is that the West sells us ideas, and sells us ideas because there's some commercial interest at stake. So those of you looking at climate change negotiations about ending coal. Why? Because then you'll use gas, and gas is the intermediate fuel. Now, why use gas? Get away of gas altogether. Until we can afford it, we'll use our cheap coal. Why move from cheap coal to slightly, very expensive gas, a little lower carbon emission, and then think of closing that? So that's why I argued that carving new pathways is important. We have to think on our own. Now, if we complete the electrification of as much of the economy as possible and get all electricity to have zero carbon emission, and therefore transport has zero carbon emission, then what remains? What remains are what are called hard-to-abate sectors. The hard-to-abate sectors are where technology today doesn't offer easy solutions. But green hydrogen has been identified in the whole world as a solution for bulk of the problems. And we in India are well positioned because we have a hydrogen mission. And because our green electricity is the cheapest in the world, so we should be able to make the cheapest green hydrogen in the world. Because our solar electricity is the cheapest and our storage is the cheapest. And if that is to be used to produce electricity from electrolyzer, or green hydrogen from electrolyzer, it becomes the cheapest. So the prescriptive part there is that instead of thinking of exporting green hydrogen and subsidizing export of green hydrogen, we should use whatever money government has to get one pilot project done for each hard-to-abate sectors to take us to the global technology frontier in green production. And the only way to do it is to do what we did in the solar project. Government absorbs the price risk and the offtake risk. So government can come out with the bid that I want a green steel plant. If the consortium in the world is willing to give me zero carbon emission, I'll take that. Somebody saying, okay, 95 emissions percent will come down, 5% will remain, I'll buy that. But I'll buy the full production for 10, 15 years. Because only if you assure purchase for 15 years will money for investment come in. Because if government is saying, I'll give you subsidy, no investor banker will have faith that government will have money in the budget to subsidize it for 15 years. There is a firm contract with government will happen. So you do that one fertilizer plant, one cement plant, one steel plant, then you are at the global technology frontier on a sunrise way in which we have not reached in any other sector. Because we'll get there as soon as Germany, China, Japan, Korea get there, if we start now. And my final argument is that once we have got there and we've discovered the higher costs, and that will happen only in the first part of the next decade, should we think about the pace at which we bring down carbon emissions in the hard-to-abate sectors. So then we'll discover 1 ton of carbon abatement in steel costs this much, cement costs this much, fertilizer costs this much. Then we can decide and we see where the world is going. And from a global point of view, CBAM needs to be welcomed, and I think we should welcome it, because the cost for Indian industry to meet the European standard of embedded carbon is lower because it can create new capacity. China has to close an existing capacity and create that capacity. So in theory, we have a cost advantage. Now, we may not have the confidence to avail of that cost advantage. Government may not put in the policy to avail of that cost advantage. Government may keep arguing it's a non-tariff trade barrier and Europe is being unfair to us. There's merit in those arguments, but I see it as an opportunity for industrial transformation and leapfrog. And if we go there, then a lot of green manufacturing will start on its own. And then we may find that the European market becomes large enough and no subsidy is required for rapid movement. We can consider that we have prospered enough and we can impose some standards, impose some taxes, give some tax benefits. But all those complex policy decisions and debates should take place in the early part of the next decade when the first green plant is functioning in India. So right now we should just focus on getting the first green steel plant, cement plant, fertilizer plant working. And green hydrogen has one other character for those of you who are not in the field, is that you create green ammonia, and green ammonia is like storage of green hydrogen. You can use it to run ships, you can use it to run power plants and so on and so forth. And in green ammonia, we have already discovered prices, and they're about the lowest in the world. And there's a government program of blending green ammonia in the existing fertilizer plants. And this is cheaper than imported ammonia, non-green. So green ammonia made in India, the price discovery is it is cheaper than imported ammonia. So I therefore feel that we are at a juncture that we can really make great breakthroughs, and that is why I have used the word rising ambition, because I think we lack ambition, and we think that, we are a poor developing country, how can we do this or how can we do that? So nobody should tell us what to do. And I will end by my final point. I won't fish out the sentence of the book, but broadly I'm saying that the attempt to become green will supplement to our effort to become developed. The two are parallel trajectories, and we will then by 47 be an advanced green industrial economy rather than just being an advanced economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for those insightful reflections. We will now move into the discussion segment between Mr. Ajay Shankar, Mr. Shantanu Dixit, and Mr. Mahesh Deodhar, inviting all the panelists to join the discussion.
So on behalf of Prayas and PIC, again, welcome you all for this interesting discussion. And we have been learning and working with Ajay Shankarji for, I think, nearly 25 years or so. And it was really insightful to read the book and actually remember many of those lessons that we learned while engaging with you, especially during the days of Electricity Act 2003. And my questions, I have a couple of questions to ask in that context and building on that experience. Electricity Act 2003 was really watershed in the electricity sector. And there are two fundamental changes that that act made. One is it delicensed generation. So anybody can come and put up generation plants. They don't have to worry about, permitting and licensing, etc. And the complementary thing was institution of independent regulatory commissions at the state and central level. And one of the expectation of that process was this will be the institution which will, if I can use that word, is depoliticize the decision making in the sector, which will ensure that decisions are made on a more rational, techno-economic considerations, and that will address many challenges that the sector is likely to face. Now, cut to 25 years down the line, and in the context of these very issues about what should be our vision for coming 25 years. Now, as you rightly pointed out, today the techno-economic analysis very clearly shows that if you have solar plus storage and some of these other advanced technologies will give you not just reliable but also least cost supply options. So if you are purely interested in reducing the cost of supply to industries and consumers, these are the best options. And there are several analyses out there in the public domain. But what we see actually happening in the sector is quite opposite. On one hand, we see that government is now going very strong on making commitment to 80 gigawatt of new coal thermal plants. Another expectation was that when these resource adequacy studies were planned, these resource adequacy studies will again bring out what is techno-economically least cost option. And then if it happens to be low carbon pathway, that should be implemented. But here again, we are seeing that actually state after state are using or misusing resource adequacy studies to create justification for new coal. And the regulatory commissions which are supposed to actually hold distribution companies accountable for their decisions, again we find that they are lacking in their rigor They are lacking in their ability to hold these companies accountable. And the question boils down to this political economy of the sector and governance processes in the sector. So how do we reconcile that there is a techno-economic opportunity so huge, so justifiable, but political economy and governance aspects of a sector which still is dominated by monopoly institutions, especially in distribution sector, and which are not taking advantage of this techno-economically wise option. So how should one look at it? How should one try to deal with this conflicting scenario? Because for actors like us and many of us who are in this room who sort of aspire to keep engaging with the sector, some advice and inputs, thoughts would be very useful.
Begin with an anecdote. I had just come to the government of India as a joint secretary. This is the year 2000. And Mr. Kumar Bangla, who unfortunately left us very early, was the minister. He was the minister before Mr. Prabhu. So he had a meeting of the state regulators. I was then handling reforms by them. So what he told the regulators was that, we want you to solve the problem which we can't solve. So we can't take decisions on tariffs, so we want you to take those decisions. And the first decision from an Andhra regulator followed the law literally, that the cost must be recovered and the tariff increase was very steep. So he was disowned by his government, chief minister, and there were demonstrations in front of his office, organized by the ruling political party. So he promptly retreated. And thereafter, this may not be completely fair to the regulators, but the regulators have figured out that this is what the political system in that state can live with, and therefore they take their decisions by an informal understanding of what the political executive can live with. And one very senior service colleague of mine told me that you have hurt the sector. I said, what do you mean? The chairman of the state electricity board used to be the senior most and most powerful trusted officer of the state government. So all he had to do was to get 5 ministers' time with the chief minister and get a decision on the tariff. Now you've destroyed that. So you have two decisions, one for the DISCOM to ask for tariff increase, and then one for the regulatory commission to give that decision. Both times the nod of the CM is required. So I'm using these anecdotes to say that in a larger philosophical sense, about 120 years back, 110 years back, the language used to be political. Then, thanks to a certain kind of worldview and dominance of that worldview, the economics became a science, politics became also a science, and it was all about data and numbers and empirical work and things like that, and all of it within some ruling or dominant paradigm about how policies should be made, how government should decide. And the extreme view was, and there was a whole paper in government floating about how all subsidies must go, petition to the Supreme Court saying freebies should go. So there is that right view, and there is the left view. Now, our political leaders have a very tough job, because in such a vast country with such diversity, with such levels of inequality, they have to get votes and survive in power. So I believe that many of us do not communicate enough with them, talk enough with them, and there's not enough discussion in the media. Because many of the rational decisions would flow if a political leader understood in his language what it was. So I'll again give one more anecdote. Say for about 20 years or so, the Power Ministry was struggling to tell the state governments to charge what it costs to supply electricity to farmers. Power Minister resolution for 20 years. I drafted a Chief Minister's resolution in 2001, Vajpayee was the Chief Minister. And there was some movement in various states. So one state, the Chief Minister lost the election. He came back and he told people he made a mistake listening to his officers and increasing the rates for farmers. And then we got a cabinet minister who came from Maharashtra. He said, I have given free electricity to the farmers now. How can I say that I made a mistake? We spent 4 hours arguing with Rajshekhar Reddy, who would become CM of Andhra, trying to persuade him it's not a good idea. He promised it the election. He heard us out, smart politician, but I knew he's not going to listen to us. So then we met our present Prime Minister when he was Chief Minister and came up with the idea in mind that you separate feeders and ration the supply of free electricity to farmers when they need it and give electricity to the villages 24 hours, then charge the urban rates. And again, being the smart politician, Modi ji immediately understood. He said, "I kar dunga," and he did it. And Gujarat electricity system has been financially quite okay there. But it's such a state subject and such a politically sensitive subject that as Prime Minister and as Power Ministers have not made the separation become a de facto reality in the whole of India. Some states claim they have done it. Then there is another dimension which is very strong, that there is also a political economy of, that we use a polite word, rents. So Delhi, it was terrible. So Sheila Dixit ji decided to privatize. So the results are very good. But successive chief ministers felt that even prosperous Delhi should not pay more for electricity. They can spend more money buying Coca-Cola and all kinds of junk. So I think we underestimate the need and the importance and the value of public communication and political. And therefore in the country we have very feeble debate on substance. So power sector is a serious problem, but I'll mention the bigger problem. The area I know very little about, but so if you look at the country, we spend 5 lakh crores a year as what would be called subsidy for agriculture and food. And yet we have a farmer who's angrier by the year. And there is this whole agitation, suicide deaths. So obviously there's something wrong in that policy. But we don't see a serious debate, at least I don't see it as an outsider, how to fix that. So I think there is great value in the work. And people like you, I remember telling you ages ago that you need branches in Bihar and UP. Because minus civil society and opinion there, I'm of the view that the political class is often floundering. So I end with one more anecdote. Somebody struggles to come to power in the state 20 years, shouting slogans and so on and so forth. And then they turn to the same set of civil servants like us, "Acha, bataiye kya kare?" So if you had such great ideas, you would have already done it. I mean, you may be out of favor, you'll come in, but you don't have brighter ideas than I have. So the intelligent debate in civil society is very important. And part of my motivation of writing the book was to get some discussion going on the right issues. And on coming to that coal question, the feeling is there that we don't want power shortage. And every now and then we have this great hope that suddenly India will start industrializing rapidly, data centers will come up, or this, that, and the other will happen. So we can't afford shortage. And the way to overcome that is to scale up solar and storage. The moment storage is large enough, then very difficult for even an investor to give money for a new thermal power. And one other argument, which is a more technical argument, which will make it. An argument has been made that solar is very expensive because transmission has grown. Now the solution for that is to put up storage where the solar projects are. And the same sunlight can run concentrated solar thermal, store energy and generate electricity at night. Now we have not yet been able to bring it on the table. Not one plant is being developed. And one concentrated solar thermal plant without storage is running in India and making good money at 15 megawatts, because the first tenders we did for the solar mission had one for concentrated solar. So I am not a pessimistic, but one point you're absolutely right. And I hope we don't see that in India, because the US is hostage to the political power and communication of the fossil fuel companies. Which is why Mr. Trump believes that all this climate change is a hoax, and drill baby drill is good for America, but market forces will defeat him because even in USA, solar power has become so cheap that in the states where he wins, nobody wants to put up a conventional plant.
Great. Just to take that discussion forward, US has, of course, gone back on what they are looking at from the transition perspective. But I want to also start what your concluding remark of your speech. You talked about two transitions happening. One is the energy transition. The second is we are going towards Vikasit Bharat. The third transition, in my view, is also the technology transition, where all these new technologies, the digital is becoming a keyword. AI, of course, is coming in. So my question is, when we try to meet all these transition goals, the way China has done, and there is a famous anecdote that Deng Xiaoping went into some inner Mongolia and said, the West has oil, Gulf has oil, but we have critical minerals. So he understood that and he built on top of that. So my question is, for India to develop, and not just from the energy transition perspective, but also developing our economy and creating those opportunities, the way China has done in solar or battery or EVs, are there any specific technologies that you think we as a country, looking at our own biogeography specific situation, are there any areas that we need to focus from the policymakers perspective, we need to promote so that we don't just do the energy transition, but we also help develop our economy further?
On technology, some first principles. So a whole generation in India has been demanding technology transfer, which is the technology is something in a cupboard and I can take it out and give it to you. And Western countries have been rightfully saying that they don't own technology. Technologies are owned by their firms and there is IPR protection. Technologies are available in the market. So my view on technology is that we should use market forces to get the best technologies in the world for outcomes. So we become technology agnostic. So the solar mission didn't go into the debate that the conversion efficiency rate should be this much or that much, or thin film is better than the other one. It was technology agnostic, and I get outcomes. Then if you move to the transition, so your batteries, cars are having batteries. So batteries, we are getting the best technologies in the world. Now, what I have argued in the book is that for critical things, government should again de-risk investment by say that 100% value addition should take place in India. So I should get solar panels starting from policy. Best technology of the world will come in and we get Indian firms to do it. And similarly for batteries, we can say that cars, EVs sold in India from prospective date should have batteries made in India with full value. Now Tatas can bring their suppliers or get into a joint venture, or Mahindras can do it, or the Chinese who are here will do it. So that is one way. But that only brings you to a point near the frontier. The real change happens, and which has only happened in East Asia, which is Japan, Korea, and now China, where when you've got the best technology deployed, you work on it and innovate and get to the next step. So what do the Japanese do? 50s, they used all American technology, but learned how to use them better. So they were the first one with some of these transistor, whatever radios which served the world. A country with neither iron ore nor coal became the most efficient producer of steel. So, but you get to that level of innovation in firms only when you have reached the global frontier. So the broad approach should be, we get there. And so when I say you get the first green steel plant or green carbon-free cement plant, you'll be at the global frontier with existing technology. Then you can try and get to the next higher level. And to get to the next higher level, I think we have an ideological problem post-91, which is that government cannot fund development of technology by the private sector. So government can spend thousands of crores and DRDO and atomic energy or whatever, or in this UGC and CSIR and IITs for research. But today it is not conceptually designed or prepared to put in 500,000 crores for innovation above the existing level of deployment of technology. So there's some technology in use. Now those who are using it will know that here I can get higher efficiency, or here my chemical should be better, or whatever. But those who are using the technology are the ones who can identify where innovation is possible. And since our firms are risk averse, I think government should give them money, identify simple things, and the model has been there for a generation, DARPA. I mean, DARPA has identified specific problems and got great results. And I remember meeting an American who was, he was very successful businessman. So what was his business model? So DARPA would fund a technology development for Pentagon. And that would succeed. Half of them would fail. The money would be written over the ground, but somebody. If he succeeded, Pentagon bought all that he needed. But the needs of Pentagon are limited. So this company from zero valuation to valuation of say $200, $400 million, it will be some minor part of the other. And then they were at a plateau. So this gentleman would do a study and find out if this technology has some potential in civilian aviation. He would buy out those firms. And out of 4 firms bought out at $200 million, one would become a $5 billion. Now we are not there, we won't go there. So what private investors do in America, I think government must find the money to do it. And the returns would be very high. But if government thinks that, okay, I'll just give grants to CSI, IIT, they'll do good work, but you won't get innovation at the technology frontier. And that's what you need. And we funded one vaccine under COVID, and we did something quite good. So you can get good results, but government has got this idea that, it's not what the Americans ever practiced, but we persuaded ourselves that government cannot fund private sector for technology. But you can fund it and say that you give me royalty if you succeed, make money in the market.
So maybe I'll just take that forward on the technology side. There is, and in your book, you also talk about nuclear as one more area. And the way I see, our nuclear journey, we have done a great job in terms of creating indigenous nuclear power capability. But our success in terms of having installed capacity reached to the higher level has not been seen. We are still like 2% of our overall installed capacity. And you talked about also hydrogen, which will be useful for hard-to-abate sector. How do you see the role of SMRs for some of these sectors where small-scale nuclear will actually help us in, decarbonizing some of these industrial sectors?
On nuclear, I have some unorthodox views. So our growth was very small because we didn't have uranium reserves. And we were denied access to. So we did the nuclear deal and got the energy waiver, and we can import uranium. But somehow we persuaded ourselves. I was not in government, so I can only say I suspect wrongly, that as a quid pro quo for getting the deal, we had to give contracts to Westinghouse and GE to build nuclear plants in India. And before the deal happened, a US embassy person educated me on nuclear. Because I used to meet people and talk. So he said, why are you looking for nuclear? We in America have not built nuclear in 30 years. We don't know how to make it anymore. You make the cheapest nuclear power plants in the world at $1,000 a kW. The next is Korea at 1,200. Next is Russia 1,400. France is 1,800. And they also haven't built for many years. So why do you need a nuclear deal? Why do you want to import plants? And in these negotiations, the cost per megawatt is turning out to be 30 crores. The tariff would have been 20 rupees plus, and finally it went nowhere. But because we were trying to do that again, I suspect, I hope I'm wrong, that our atomic energy department didn't get the sanction to build new plants. So only now they've got sanction for 10 plants of 700. And now in every industrial sector, we see that there are economies of scale. So why has nuclear thermal gone from 200 to 500 to 800 to 700? Because the cost per unit. I have yet to see any literature anywhere saying that the cost per unit of electricity from SMR will be lower than our 700. The SMRs in the West are still at a design stage. So I would be very reluctant for the first plant which gets a regulatory approval the US is installed in it. So I can't understand the hype. Bringing in the private sector into nuclear generation is fine. But we have to be very conscious that it has to be slow and gradual because our industrial safety culture is unfortunately still that of a very early stage of development. I mean, at construction sites, people die, things fall here and there. So I would much rather have a slower build-up for the next 5-10 years and then a rapid. So SMRs, I'm not persuaded as yet that is any solution. And in that context also, I mean, these data centers are energy and water customers. The other day in an event I was told 100 words of chat GPT consumes 1 glass of water. So this water scarce and power scarce country is so excited by data centers. I'm still trying to understand what India would gain from these data centers. But that's a different sort of topic for discussion another day.
We also want to open it up for people, but should we do a round quickly? Anybody wants to ask any questions? Yeah? Chinmay, if you can just.
Bold step. Indian Navy has taken some bold steps in Neswa. Maybe encouraging.
B.H. Shrikant, Renewable Energy Consultant. Two critical issues I would like to raise to interact with you. This is a methanol economy. Niti Aayog has conceptualized the importance of methanol economy. Okay, please, at your best, you please highlight upon it. And another issue, in spite of dire urgency of this solar thermal steam generation project, why subsidy is not considered for that project? Solar photovoltaic, that is a subsidy, okay. For domestic purpose, they on 1st October 2014, that subsidy had been closed. For institutional purpose, solar thermal steam generation project, till that time I was enjoying, or in 2019, that subsidy was closed. In spite of the importance to save the conventional fuels like coal, furnace oil, and gas, etc., why MNRE is not understanding that importance, vital importance to offer subsidy to encourage factories to come forward solar thermal steam generation project? Thank you.
Well, solar thermal for process heat is one of the lowest hanging fruit in the energy transition. So you are absolutely right that this is neglected. Because in solar power, what do? We get the heat, make electricity, lose in some energy, then use that electricity. So when you use that heat directly, it's obviously better. So we are about to come out with a paper on solar thermal. But what I'm arguing there is the approach of the solar mission that invite bids for supply of process heat, long-term contract, and if the cost is higher, then you give an operational subsidy for the industrial user rather than a capital subsidy. Because I believe as government policy, a operating subsidy is any day more efficient than a capital subsidy because the entrepreneur has an interest in minimizing his capital cost. His returns are higher, and if it's a competitive bid, then the price of heat or electricity or solar electricity is lower. So my vision is the emergence of a solar theme, a thermal heat supply industry, which is competitive like the solar panel electricity supply industry. This is what I'm going to argue in the paper, which I hope will be out in a few weeks.
Now the solar thermal steam
But I'm not in government, so I can't
government.
so I can't answer for government as to why it did something or is not doing.
Now it is profitable with a payback period of hardly 3.5 years to 4 years. Now it is profitable as on today.
No, I agree with you.
What about methanol economy? Methanol economy. Methanol economy.
Methanol, again, methanol could potentially have a great future because you can get methanol which is green from bio-waste. You can get methanol from green hydrogen. Both have a huge future, but I think they need technology funding by government and pilot projects supported fully by government because the market will not give us outcome in methanol of the kind we need. So I'm with you in methanol getting more importance in it.
Hello. So you spoke about going electrical energy. So right now, my question was basically related to lithium. Right now, I think we rely on China for 90% of our lithium imports, and our lithium mining is also at a very young stage. So do we? How do we move to achieve net zero? Do we rely on China or do we invest more in lithium mining? And also related to solar energy. Does the government focus more on selling solar energy to promote it? Like we know about in Gujarat, we sell solar energy to the grid. So how does it work that way to achieve net zero by 2070?
There is a legitimate concern that do we have enough lithium in the planet to provide all the batteries for doing away with thermal generation and for all the solar energy? That's a legitimate concern. But the market is an extraordinary power. So last few years, the prices of lithium in the international market have gone down. And which is why our battery prices have fallen. Last 10 years, battery storage prices have fallen by 90%. But again, globally, technology is evolving in very dramatic ways to reduce dependence on storage, for storage on lithium ion. So there is a sodium ion technology, there are sodium ion batteries, there are startup firms in the rest of the world. Our own Reliance, I think, bought out one of these UK startups. China, which is very forward-looking on technology, the Chinese government, not their car companies, did a joint venture with Volkswagen to develop a car using a sodium ion battery. And that sodium ion battery is on the road for 2 years now. Then there is an MIT startup which is called a molten metal battery, where it uses very common materials. It's the first pilot plant is due to come up somewhere. Our own Reliance has invested there also. So I am very optimistic that technology will give us solutions for this. And for India, we have pump storage and concentrated solar thermal for storage. So even if there's no battery storage, we can still store all the solar power that we need.
Hello, sir. Good evening to everybody. So my name is Suvash Kelkar. I have worked in the distribution as well as transmission. My first question is, do you think that the agriculture electricity estimation is one of the biggest challenge for DISCOM in India? If so, is there any solution other than the 100% DT metering or speeder metering? That is my first question. Second question is that as far as our mission is concerned, that's 500 gigawatt by 2030. What I have seen that right now it is 150 gigawatt as far as the solar is concerned. Again, it comes to, let us say, for example, the 300. Assuming that the other generation are there, it will come almost 200 to 250 gigawatt. That must come in by 2030. The first assumption for your discussion, the land is not a problem, correct? Am I correct? Then, what I observed in the even tariff also, when we are talking about the solar generation, we are talking about the gigawatt, megawatt. Nobody talk about the energy. In the energy term, it is different. Energy, it is the capacity utilization factor is hardly 19 to 20%. Number one. Number two, if, for example, if we want to build a 250 gigawatt, there is not a transparency in that. What should be if the land is available, what should be the capacity utilized for the distributed generation? Because ultimate distribution generation is the solutions to address our agriculture demand. And if, for example, when there is a comparison, for example, when you talk about the distributed generation, it is costing less than 3 rupees, correct? But when we talk about the latest distribution, what the 500 megawatt, 800 megawatt, even though the cost is 3 rupees, but considering the transmission, considering that cost is not at 3 rupees, that will come to again 6 to 7 rupees. That consideration should be taken into consideration, what I consider. Thank you, sir.
Well, I agree with you in the sense that some of these ideas I have spelled out in the book. So we have a distortion in having large solar projects rather than decentralized solar projects. That distortion is being overcome partly by PM Kusum, partly by rooftop solar program. And I hope that that gathers greater momentum, because if you have solar generation at the rooftop of my house or in a village, then there is hardly any investment in transmission. So if India has 6 lakh villages, and each village 1 megawatt can easily come of solar power, you have a potential of 6 lakh megawatts. And the cost of that electricity is far lower than the 7-8 rupees which it takes the DISCOM to take electricity to the village. So it's a win-win for the DISCOM as well as the investor who puts up that megawatt. That's what I've argued in the book, and I hope that happens. And on transmission, I have the view that this free ride of zero transmission for solar power should end. Because when it ends, then everybody will discover the actual costs. And then more rational decisions will get taken.
Good evening. Just so broad question for more on policy making. You started your talk with tariff-based procurements and so on, and connecting that with 500 gigawatt target and what the central sector procurement agencies are doing. By now, it's common knowledge that that program is sense of number of PPAs and so on, right? I mean, there is so many tenders and these things that come out, but so very few of them are being successful. There is enough conversation about the causality of it also. My question is, when policies are made at a central level, how are these things thought through in terms of bottlenecks that can be encountered at a midstream level, at a downstream level? By that I mean what DISCOMs can, what regulators can. So connecting the big announcement of 500 gigawatts or 50 gigawatts each year to what actually trickles down through to a particular DISCOM, how does policy making think about it?
Making is complex. I'll be honest to say it's complex. It's zigzag very often. There are no certain answers. But the system is designed, and more open a society like ours is, there is always feedback and there is always scope for course correction keeps happening. But if I look at the macro picture, the fact is that we have 140,000 megawatts of solar power put up entirely by private money, entirely the result of these tenders. Obviously, it's working. There'll be an occasional problem here and there may be mistakes. But at a macro level, it's a great success. And similarly, on storage, we are seeing success. On batteries, we are seeing success. And because the sector is concurrent and it's finally the DISCOMs and the states which act. So clearly, there is a lot of to and fro between the center and the states, and things move. And I think they're broadly moving in the right direction. And you are right that a megawatt is misleading, because roughly 4 megawatts of solar would equal 1 megawatt of
there has been a news that there are a lot of unsigned PPAs for solar or wind. So, do you think it is time to revisit the bidding criteria, or do we revisit the whole concept of having 50 gigawatt bidding in a year?
I think the problem of unsigned PPAs is not as large as it is made out to be. What has happened is at a macro level that demand has not grown. So the state DISCOM has contracts for supply of electricity, which is more than it needs. So entering a fresh PPA for solar means entering into a contract for product it doesn't think it needs today. Very often that is the case. And that is why in the book I argue that we need to ramp up storage very rapidly. Because once there is enough storage, then the DISCOM does not need to enter into a new PPA for thermal to be able to provide reliable electricity. Once that becomes clear, that enough storage is coming up, solar plus storage can give me reliable electricity, then signing the contract would be easier. So my view is that DISCOM should be entering contracts for storage at a rate which is higher than for solar because they have to make up for the backlog. And that contracting is best done by a DISCOM because it should own that storage. So today we have bids for round-the-clock supply of green electricity. That sounds very good, round-the-clock supply of green electricity, but in the real world, 70% is still coming from thermal. So I need storage to be able to also increase capacity utilization of thermal. And that is also what I've argued.
So we are running out of time. I think we'll have to wrap up in the interest of time. But of course, he's available. There is a book also that is kept. So I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to connect with him one-on-one, maybe a little later. But I'll request Nupur sir, if you are okay to take the proceedings forward.
Yes, thank you for those thoughtful questions and responses. I now invite Mr. Dinanath Kholkar, Director of PIC, to kindly felicitate Mr. Ajay Shankar. Also requesting the panelists to stay on the dais for a group photograph afterwards. To conclude, requesting Dina sir to deliver the vote of thanks.
First of all, thank you to all of you for being here today. And special thanks to Ajay Shankar sir for sharing the entire journey of his book as well as his experiences in a very, very important topic. Also to Shantanu Dixit and Mahesh Deodhar for conducting this discussion very well and very interesting set of questions. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about Pune International Center's Center for Sustainable Energy and Mobility, which is the area that Mahesh and team lead out here. There's some interesting work that is happening. And again, thanks to Prayas for their partnership and getting this organized. And I'm sure there'll be more opportunities. But let me just give a quick update on the work that happens at CSEM. There are efforts on bringing smart microgrids and their adoption into real life. There are some focused efforts that they're working on. Also, data centers and their resource use. This is another area of focus. Plus, energy efficiency is another area where we have been working very closely with various organizations in this area. So those of you who are from the energy sector, we'd love to have more participation and collaboration. Again, I'd like to thank Prayas and especially Ashok Srinivas for reaching out and getting this event organized. And we look forward to having many more events like this. Thank you.